Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Pesachim Daf Mem Tes begins with two Mishnayos in quick succession, one after the other, and then launches into a lengthy Agadata Gemara. So the two Mishnayos, the first is discussing what you do when Erev Pesach is Shabbos, how you destroy chametz. The second is discussing situations in which if you forgot to destroy your chametz and you traveled away, when you have to go back to destroy it, and when can you just be mevatel and make it considered worthless. The Gemara's long Agadata is discussing a su'uda, whether Talmid Chacham should partake of a party, a meal, a suda, whether he shouldn't, whether one should marry a bas kohen or not, the merits of marrying a bas kohen and the risks involved, and the merits and risks involved in marrying your daughter off to a Talmid Chacham, and then the importance of marrying into Talmid Chachamim families. And then we'll discuss Amaratzim at length. The Gemara has a lot of negative things to say about Amaratzim, and we'll have to work through them and to see how they apply. So our first Mishnah begins discussing what happens when Erev Pesach Shabbos. You're supposed to destroy the chametz, but you can't burn chametz on Shabbos. So what do you do? So the Mishnah has three opinions. Rabbi Meir says only save what you're planning on eating on Shabbos itself. You shouldn't have anything left to burn. Everything else destroy before Shabbos because you have to burn it, and you may not find anybody to eat it. Therefore, destroy everything. Just leave a concise or two over for Shabbos itself. The Chachamim say, don't worry about it, you'll find people to eat it. Worst comes to worst, you can always crumble it up and spread it to the wind, so don't destroy anything before Shabbos. Just leave it, and on Shabbos you'll destroy it. And Rabbi Tzadok says, depends what type of chametz you're talking about. If it's truma, so then we are concerned you may not find anybody to eat it, because only Kahanim are allowed to eat truma, therefore you should destroy all the truma before Shabbos. If, however, it is chulin, it is no kedusha, then you can leave it over, and on Shabbos itself you'll be able to destroy it. Not a problem. Now, Gemara has just a brisa where Rabbi Tzadok records an incident which apparently is meant to support his position. He says, I once went with my father, we spent Shabbos in Yavne, and Erev Pesach was a Shabbos, and Rabban Gamliel sent his appointee, whose name was Zezunin, to come tell us it is the time for destroying chametz. And I went with my father, we destroyed the chametz. So you see clearly that the time for destroying chametz is on Shabbos. That's when the time, he said this is the time. So that is the time for destroying chametz. So therefore I'm correct, at least as far as the chulin, you can destroy it on Pesach itself. Okay, next Mishnah. This Mishnah is discussing what you do if you traveled away from home and you remember that you have chametz left behind in your house. So there are two ways of getting rid of chametz. There's search and destroy, making sure that it's actually physically gone, or there's bittul. You could mentally decide that this chametz is valueless to me and that it's not considered to be your chametz. It's not a problem. Now, the Gemara usually wants you to do both of them. We don't want you to rely on just bittul. The question is, when do we say that you have to go back and destroy it, and when do we say that you can just do bittul, just rely on being mevatlet? So the Gemara, the Mishnah, brings three levels of reasons that you traveled. One is if you went to save somebody, sakanas nefashos. There, the halach is you don't have to go back under any circumstances. Second level is if you want to do a mitzvah. So there you have to go back if you can still get there, get home, destroy your chametz, and go back and still get to your mitzvah. If you can't, then you don't have to go back and do it. The third is if you went for rishus, for your own optional activities, then you have to go back no matter what. And if you don't get to where you needed to go, so that's just too bad. Now, what are the examples of this? So the Mishnah fills in examples. The Mishnah says an example of saving somebody is if you needed to save somebody who was at the risk of being chased or killed by the goyim who are chasing him, or if he's in a flooding river, or if he's attacked by robbers and bandits, or if there's a fire, or if a building collapsed on him. All these things you can go save, you can go straight back no matter what. Examples of mitzvah: somebody who's on his way to Shechtas Karban Pesach, somebody's on his way to a bris milah for his own son, or somebody's going on his way to a sudas erison. That means, in the days of Chazal, a marriage happened in two stages. There was the erison, the betrothal, which completes the marriage in the sense that now they are locked to each other, the man and the woman, but they aren't actually permitted to each other, and that comes later in the Nisuin. So the erison involves a party. This is simcha, it's a wedding. So if you're going to your own wedding, so that you're allowed to do, you don't have to go back unless you have time to get back and still make it to the wedding. Now, the examples of things which are only a rishus is if you wanted to go somewhere to set up your permanent place for Shabbos or for Yom Tov in a certain spot so that you can extend your tchum, not because you need to extend your tchum to be able to do a mitzvah, but you want to extend your tchum because you want to be able to go somewhere which is optional for you. Okay, that's the first half of the Mishnah, discussing somebody who forgot his chametz. Now the Gemara has another similar parallel case, that's discussing somebody. The Mishnah has another similar parallel case. That's discussing somebody who was traveling out of Yerushalayim, and he left Yerushalayim, and he realized that he's carrying carbon meat with him. He's carrying basar kachim. The halacha is that those meats, when they leave the walls of Yerushalayim, they become puzzle. You can't eat them. You have to burn them. The correct place to burn them is you're really supposed to burn them in Yerushalayim, in front of the Beis HaMikdash. There's a special spot in Har Bayis where they're supposed to be burned. The question is, you have to go back. You have to go back and burn it or not. So the Mishnah says, depends how far you went. If you went past the village of Tzofim, which is possibly Mount Scopus, Har Tzofim, which is the furthest place from Yerushalayim, which you can still see the Beis HaMikdash, you can still see the old city of Yerushalayim. So if you went past there, we don't require you to go back. You can just burn it wherever you are when you realize. If, however, you're within the Tzofim, you're not that far, then we require you to go back to Yerushalayim in front of the Beis HaMikdash, in front of Har Bayis, and burn it there. You can even use wood that's set aside for the Mizbeach. You're allowed to use that in order to burn carbon meats that became puzzle. Now, last halacha in the Mishnah is what size do you have to go back for? Both carbon meats and chametz. What size do you have to go back for? So there's three opinions. Rabbi Meir says it has to be the size of an egg for both of them. Rabbi Yehuda says it has to be the size of an olive, a concise for both of them. The Chachamim say it splits. Holy meats, carbon meats, even if it's just a concise, you have to go back in circumstances where you're required to go back, and if it's chametz, you only have to go back if you have the size of an actual egg. An egg, a kibetza. Good. Now the Gemara begins, and the Gemara says, first of all, we have defined in our list of things which are a mitzvah, one of the things on the list was going to get married, to do it in Eresin, a sudas Eresin, where you're traveling to your father-in-law's house, right? That's where the woman that you're marrying is. So Gemara says we have a different brisa that lists that as a rishus, as an optional, permissible thing where you have to go back even if you won't make it to the party at all. So which is it? It's a contradiction. So Gemara says not a contradiction. Two reasons, two potential ways that it's not. First of all, is a machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi whether a sudas eresin, a wedding party, is a mitzvah or not. So according to Rabbi Yehuda that it's not a mitzvah is the brisa that says it is not a mitzvah. According to Rabbi Yosi that says that it is a mitzvah, that's our Mishnah here that says that it is a mitzvah. So Gemara says the second way of resolving it is actually as follows. There were two seudos eresin. There's the original one at the marriage that happens. That Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi both agree is a mitzvah, and therefore that's what our Mishnah is talking about. Then there's a second sudas eresin where sometime afterwards the chassan brings gifts to the kala and they make a little party then. So that is a machlokes if it's a mitzvah or not. So according to Rabbi Yehuda that it's not a mitzvah, he could be the author of the brisa, and he's referring to that when he says it's not a mitzvah. And in our Mishnah, it could also be Rabbi Yehuda, but he was referring to the first suda, the original eresin, and that's what he was referring to when he said that it is a mitzvah itself. Okay, now the Gemara launches into its lengthy. I got it. The Gemara begins with the brisa where Rabbi Shimon says Talmid Chacham should not be partaking of a suda which is not a mitzvah. Any meal, any party which is not a mitzvah, you should not be joining. Says the Gemara, what's a good example of a suda that's not a mitzvah? Says Rabbi Yechanan, when a Yisrael, a regular Jew, marries the daughter of a kohen. Or another thing would be if a Talmid Chacham marries the daughter of an Am Haaretz, an ignoramus, an unlearned person. So the Gemara expounds on this idea. The Gemara says that Rabbi Yechanan said that when a Jew marries a Bas Kohen, a Kohenes, it's not going to work out well. What's not going to work out well about it? Rabbi Yechanan said either he's going to divorce her, or she will end up being widowed, or she won't have children. And then there's a brisa that says either she's going to marry him too early, or he's going to marry her too early, or they're going to end up being poor. Where it says, really? You marry a Kohenes, you become poor? But Rabbi Yechanan says somebody who wants to become rich should marry a descendant of Aaron. So you see that making people, that marrying Kohenes makes one rich. Now the brisa there continued and says, because you have Torah and Kahuna in one place. So the Gemara says that's why it makes you rich, because that's talking about a Talmid Chacham marrying a Bas Kohen, a Kohenes. That is okay, because that's befitting for the descendants of Aaron and Kohen to marry a Talmid Chacham. However, if it's an Am Haaretz, an ignoramus, then it's not befitting. Says Rabbi Shua, I once married a Kohenes, and I got sick because Aaron was apparently not happy to have me as a grandson-in-law. Rav Idi bar Avin married a Kohenes, however, and he had two children who were great Talmidei Chachamim, Rav Sheshes, brother Rav Idi, and Rav Yeshua, brother Rav Idi, and so there that worked out well. Says Rav Papa, if I had not married a Kohenes, I would not have become rich. That's an example of somebody who actually becomes rich. Now, Rav Kahana, however, didn't work out too well. Rav Kahana was not a Kohen, but he did marry a Bas Kohen, and Rav Kahana ended up killing somebody in order to save someone else, and the government chased him out of Bavel. He had to flee, and he ran to Eretz Yisrael. So he said, had I not been married to a Kohenes, I would not have had to run away from my hometown. Apparently, Aaron was not pleased to have a great-grandson-in-law who killed somebody. So Gemara says, what do you mean? Your being chased out wasn't the problem. You went to Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is great. There's Torah there. It's wonderful. So he said, yes, that's true. Eretz Yisrael is great. However, a person should leave the place where he is and go to a place of Torah from his own volition. He should not be chased out. Being chased out, that was a result of the fact that I was married to a Kohenes. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yitzchak says anybody who eats from Yisudas Rishus is going to end up going into Golos. Like it says in the Pasuk, Kar Matzan v'Agolim v'Tech Marbek, they ate fat lambs and they took calves out of the stalls. And then right after that it says, L'chein ati yiglu b'roish goyim, you're going to be rejected and sent out into Golos. Now the Gemara has a list of negative things listed in a brayso. It says about a Talmid Chacham who eats from a Suda. It says the Gemara, Talmid Chacham who enjoys the Suda in any place, even if it's a Sudas mitzvah, it's going to be bad news. In the end, he's going to destroy his own house. His wife will become a widow. His children will become orphans. He's going to forget his learning, and as a result of that, he's going to end up in a lot of arguments. Machloksin, he'll be involved in disputes. People aren't going to listen to him. He's going to end up being a chilul Hashem. People will see how he's acting, and he'll be disgraced to the name of heaven. He'll be disgraced to the name of his Rebbe. They'll say you have a Talmud like that. He'll be disgraced in the name of his father. They'll say you have a son like that, and he'll be disgraced to his children and to his grandchildren, they will say about them, look what kind of father and grandfather he has, until all generations. It'll be a disgrace for all his progeny forever. What's the disgrace? So Abaye says they're going to call the kids the son of the oven warmer because he's constantly warming the oven. Rava says they'll call him the son of the bar dancer, like the people who do skits and dances in a bar in order to get free food. Rav Papa said they'll call him the kids of the plate liquor, and Vishmaya said they'll call him the kids of the guy who sleeps on his own clothes. Because drunkards don't go home, they just fold their clothes in the street and go to sleep. Okay. Now, says the Gemara, a couple of baraisas about marrying Talmidei Chachamim or Bas Talmidei Chachamim. So the Gemara says a person should sell everything he has in order to marry a daughter of a Talmid Chacham. That way you'll know that your wife is raised by a Talmid Chacham. If you die yourself, or if you are forced to flee and you're unable to raise your children, they'll be raised by a Bas Talmid Chacham and they'll grow up to be Talmidei Chachamim. You should not marry the daughter of an Am Ha'aretz in ignoramus, because if you die or you have to flee, you'll end up with your children being raised as ignorami. Says the Brisa, further, a person should always sell everything that he has in order to afford to marry his daughter off to a Talmid Chacham and marry a Bas Talmid Chacham himself. Why? Because when you have Talmidei Chachamim families marrying into each other, it's like two grapevines that are mixed together. Their wine that's produced is beautiful and acceptable. Otherwise, if there's an Am Ha'aretz marrying into a Talmid Chacham family, then it's like the grapes of a thorn bush combining with the grapes of a vineyard, and that is bad and not acceptable. The Gemara now brings another similar brisa, but this one begins with marrying the daughter of a Talmid Chacham, but then it extends the list to who you should marry if you couldn't find Bas Talmid Chacham, and then it launches into a list of terrible things that the Gemara says about Amaratzim. Not terrible that the Gemara says them, terrible that they exist. So first of all, let's see the Brisa. The Brisa says that somebody should sell all his belongings if he needs to in order to be able to marry the daughter of Talmid Chacham. If he can't find one, then he should marry the daughter of tzaddikim, people who do mitzvahs. Can't find somebody like that, then he should marry the daughter of the leaders of the congregation. Can't find that, he should marry the daughter of the Gabbai Tzedakah, people in charge of collecting the charity. Those are trustworthy people. Can't find something like that, he should marry the daughter of Rabbeim, of little children, But one thing you should definitely avoid is marrying the daughter of an Am Haaretz. Now the list begins, and the Rishonim here have some discussion explaining how this could be. It says very terrible things. Some explain that it's referring to a Am Haaretz, not just somebody who didn't learn, but somebody who is actually a murderer, or somebody who's chasing after others to engage in immoral behavior, or people who don't do mitzvahs well at all. Either way, it certainly doesn't just mean someone who didn't learn. It's coming after this entire list, so it's certainly referring to somebody who's not on that list. But as you will see, it's obviously referring to people on a very severe level. Several Mefarshim explain it's not meant to be taken literally at all. The entire list is just mashal. It's just parable for other things. So what does the list say? It says you shouldn't marry the daughter of Am Haaretzim in Reimai because they are shekets, they are vermin. Their wives are insects, creepy crawlies, and their daughters are animals. And somebody who will marry them is violating the issur of not lying together with an animal. Brisa says that it is forbidden for an Am Haaretz to eat meat at all. Like it says, somebody who has Torah could eat animals and birds. Somebody who doesn't should not eat them at all. It says, Gemara Rabbi Eliezer says, an Am Haaretz is allowed to be stabbed to death even on Yom Kippur, which is Shabbos. This is obviously referring to saving somebody's life, or it's not meant to be understood literally. His Talmidim said, why do you have to stab him for? Why don't you just shecht him, slaughter him? We said, no, they don't deserve the honor of slaughter, which gets a bracha. Just stab him. You don't have to worry about any bracha issues. This is Rabbi Elazar. Am Haaretz, you should not walk with him on the road because he doesn't bother learning. And the Torah is chayecha v'arech yamecha. He doesn't care about his own life. He's certainly not going to care about your life, and you never know what he might do to you. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani says in Rabbi Yechanan, you're allowed to kill him by ripping him open like a fish. You don't have to kill him cleanly. Shmuel bar Yitzchak says you can even rip him open from his back, which you wouldn't even do for a fish. Says the Brisa, Rabbi Kiva says, when I was an Am Haaretz, I used to say, I wish somebody would give me a Talmid Chacham and I could bite him like a donkey. Mara says, bite him like his Talmidim said to him, Rabbi, why you say to bite him like a donkey? Say bite him like a dog. He said, no, because when the donkey bites, he breaks bones. The dog doesn't break bones, and I wanted to break bones. Okay. Some Mefarshim here explain that Rabbi Kiva is saying that the Am Haaretzim understand how the Talmidei Chachamim look at them, and that's why when he was in Am Haaretz, he wanted to fight back against the Talmidei Chachamim, but he himself, other than that detail, he was a person of good character even before he learned. Says the Brisa, Rabbi Meir says, somebody who marries his daughter to an Am Haaretz is as if he has tied her and left her bound and gagged in front of a lion. He's left her as prey for the lion, just like a lion will eat his meat, will eat his prey without waiting for them to die so that they avoid the suffering. So too, this Am Haaretz will take advantage of his wife in a carnal way without her involvement, without her interest, without appeasing her, without getting her into the mood, and he'll be just fulfilling his needs like a lion eating meat. He has no embarrassment from that. Says the Brisa further, Rabbi Eliezer says that if not for the fact that the Am Haaretzim needed us to teach them skills that they use for the marketplace, they would just kill us all. Rabbi Chia said, somebody who learns the Torah while an Am Haaretz is watching is as if he is being together with that man's betrothed, with his arusa, like it says, Torah Tzivah Moshe Morasha. Moshe taught us the Torah, and that is a morasa. A morasha, it means an inheritance, but it could be read as morasa, a betrothed woman. It says anywhere further, the hatred that the Am Haaretzim have for the Talmidei Chachamim is greater than the hatred that the Goyim have for the Jews, and the wives of the Am Haaretzim hate the Talmidei Chachamim even more. It says somebody who was a Talmid Chacham and then went off and stopped learning and became non-Torah observant is worse. His hatred is worse than all of them. It says the Brisa, 6 things were said about Am Haaretz. You should not appoint them to be witnesses. You should not accept their testimony. You should not tell them any secrets. You should not appoint them to be caretakers for any children, for any orphans. You should not appoint them to be in charge of charity funds, and you should not walk with them along the road. Some say a 7th thing, you should not return their lost objects. And the Tanakama didn't list that, not because he had any special feelings for the Amaretz, but because he said maybe one day he'll have a child or a descendant who will be Talmud Chacham, and if you return this lost object, he'll be able to benefit from that. Okay, leaving the Sagada to the Gemara now refers back to the Mishnah. Mishnah had brought a machlokas between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim as to whether the minimum size that will make you go back to get rid of chametz or to burn the carbon meat in the right place, whether that minimum size is an egg size or an olive size. The Gemara says that means to imply that Rabbi Meir holds that an egg size is what's concise, and Rabbi Huda holds that a concise, an olive size is what's significant. We have a brayso that says the opposite. The brayso is talking about how much bread you have to eat in order to be obligated in joining a zimun, 3 people saying Berachas Hamazon together. And there, Rabbi Huda said it's got to be an egg size. Rabbi Yehuda said it has to be an egg size, and Tanakama, who was Rabbi Meir, says it has to be an olive size. So Rabbi Yechanan says, flip it, it's a mistake. Abai says, no, it's not a mistake. They're 2 different halachos, they're 2 different sources, and that's why they have opposite opinions. As far as the halacha of when you have to say Berachas Hamazon together, the Torah says, V'achalta v'savata, you should eat and you should be full. So Rabbi Meir learns that V'achalta is eating, and v'savata is drinking, and therefore eating, the minimum size for eating is the amount that qualifies as a standard eating session, which is a kezayis. However, Rabbi Huda says no. It means v'chalta means eating, and v'savata means being full, doesn't mean drinking. And therefore you only have to bench if you're doing an eating, which is a filling, which fills you up. And that is a shir svia, which is the size of an egg. So that's why they have that machlokas here. Machlokas here is about something else. Machlokas here is what do we consider to be significant as far as chametz and karbonos, and that's linked to the other halachos of karbonos. So Rabbi Meir says the tumah of food has got to be the minimum size food to be mekabel tumas eichlin is an egg size, and therefore that is the halacha here also an egg size. Rabbi Huda says the minimum size that is usher for you to eat, that you get an issur d'oraisa, is a kezayis size, and we follow that size as far as the halacha of going back to burn it or to get rid of the chametz. Now the Gemara just has one more opinion here. Brayso Rabbi Nosson says that they both are 2 beitzim. It's more than anybody, and the Gemara says the Chachamim did not accept that.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.